Welcome to Build Fix, everyone. This is a new series on my channel, but definitely not a new idea. Ever since the beginning of time, or at least since PC building became a thing, there's been a fundamental question that builders new and old have to ask. What parts should I choose to build my computer? The answer is not always straightforward. It can vary based on your budget, your intended use, and your monitor's resolution and refresh rate in particular for a gaming PC. So I am partnering with PCPartPicker, who is proudly sponsoring this series, to choose a handful of parts lists submitted by you guys to go over and provide my feedback. What I think is good, what I think is bad, to provide the best bang for the buck and value for the dollar. A couple notes before we dive in. The parts list I'm going over today will be linked in the video's description, and I'm also very interested in your feedback. So if you have any comments for me on this video, or if you want to just hit the thumbs up button or share it or anything like that, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're interested in me looking over your parts list, keep an eye out for a community post on YouTube, which I'll put up about a day before I shoot the video. That's where you can reply and put your PC part picker list or just a text list of the hardware that you're currently looking at or potentially upgrading. Our first build was submitted as a comment reply to a video from last month where I announced this series. Thank you to 506363. And this is a build they're looking to upgrade. They're currently running an AM4 system, and I will be covering upgrade path builds as well as brand new builds on this series. But I went ahead and loaded up the parts that were listed on PCPartPicker. And if you're looking at the prices here, note that when PC hardware gets a little bit older, when it's 2, 3, 4 years old, prices can sometimes stay artificially high, even though there are much better options for less money or the same money right now. For instance, a Ryzen 7 2700 is not worth 185 bucks right now. But part of the reason I chose this build is because I feel like a lot of people might be in this same situation. They're currently running an AM4 system, looking for potentially an upgrade path, but maybe not necessarily rebuilding the system completely. And just a couple more notes from the viewer. They're 2K gaming, so 2560 by 1440, a little bit of VR play with an HTC Vive Pro 2, and they're already eyeing the 5800X3D, which is going to be one of the best potential upgrades you can get to for specifically gaming on the AM4 platform. They're also currently running a Wraith stock cooler after having a bit of an issue mounting a Noctua NHU12A. So I'm gonna go ahead and edit this list, and we can choose some parts to swap in or swap out. Obviously the CPU is one of the first upgrade potentially things, and there are two, or I would say three really good choices with the 5000 series X3D CPUs. 5600X3D is a little bit of a tougher sell because it's a 6-core, it's also only available at Micro Center. There's about a $40 to $45 gap right now between the 5700X3D and 5800X3D. Performance difference between these two is going to be pretty marginal since we're mostly looking at a slight difference in frequency, but since they already said 5800X3D was on the radar, we'll go with that. When I talk about this system having good bones to work with for upgrades though, I'm specifically referring to like this motherboard. You got an X570 MPG motherboard from MSI, very solid, very good motherboard. We also have a G.SKILL Ripjaws 32 gig kit. I noticed the comment that you have XMP turned off. I would say turn that back on. It is doubtable that an XMP 3600 setting is going to actually cause your memory to fail for any reason. And if you are experiencing any instability, just set your XMP values, then go into your memory frequency setting and dial it back to 3400 or even 3200, and that should get you more stability. Alternatively, you could try loosening the timings by just maybe a point or two per value, which is another way you can get some finicky memory to run stably. Beyond that, you have a 3TB NVMe SSD configuration. You've got a pretty solid Rosewill PHOTON 850 watt power supply, which I'd say you're perfectly fine with as well. The case was not brought up, so that's the one question in my brain is what case you're currently using. The main reason I double check your case is because you're probably gonna want a better cooler for the 5800X3D other than the Wraith Stealth. I mean, you could get by, but given that the Thermalright Peerless Assassin is only about $34, I would say tack that one on too. And then I should have led with this, but if you're talking about upgrading your CPU to a 5800X3D, then I would say you probably want to upgrade your graphics card at the same time. An RTX 2070 Super is still a perfectly decent graphics card, but it's probably not being held back as much by the 2700 CPU as a 40 series GPU would, or even a higher end 30 series graphics card. So I would say consider doing both of these upgrades at the same time. If you do both at the same time, you're probably looking at spending $700 to $900. But if you can't afford that, you can get that CPU upgrade. You could also upgrade to something like a 4070 Super, which is gonna run you about $600 for an entry level. The Radeon RX 7800 XT would also be a really solid choice for around $500, or even if you could get a little bit cheaper than that. Oh look, look, the 4070 Super is even less than $600 now. So if we add that in, but this right here is how I would fix your build. It'd be just over $900 in terms of an upgrade, but between the CPU, the X3D upgrade, setting your memory back to its proper speed, or at least roughly close to that, and of course the huge GPU upgrade from the 2070 to the 4070 Super, that will last you a while and you will see a massive improvement in your frame rates at 1440p. Our next build is a new build, like a build being built from scratch from Bobo-EY8FC. This is a high-end build in the Height Y70 Touch, and I was able to figure out as I was partying this out that it's also an all-white build. And I appreciate that the monitor was included here with the 5120 by 1440 resolution. That's basically like a double-wide 1440 monitor. And this is clearly not a budget build. In fact, as I've parted everything out, we're looking at $4,500 or so. And yet, I still think that there are some ways that we could make this build much better. Now, we're talking about the top Intel processor that's currently available, which is $550, which is actually less than AMD's current top-end CPU. I should say that's not including the 14900KS, but beyond that, we have liquid cooling, we have like a high-end $724 motherboard. They wanted a pretty substantial storage configuration. I had to make a couple assumptions for some of these parts, and they also want to build in the Height Y70, the non-touch. These currently aren't listed on PCPartPicker at the moment, but here's the Height Y70 non-touch, which is $220, available in black and white and red and a few other colors. Oh, and I should say with this total price, I also included the monitor, which again, I'm making a little bit of an assumption here because LG has multiple 49-inch 5120 by 1440 monitors. This is the best one. It's 240 Hertz. So if you're looking at that resolution and that refresh rate, you're gonna need a pretty high-end gaming PC to push your frames. And with this $4,500 build, or I would say, I guess $3,500 if you don't really include the monitor, we have a 4070 Ti Super. We also have a 32 gig memory kit, which is fine. But if we're talking about a $3,500 PC, there's a couple things I would upgrade and a couple things I might potentially downgrade. Now, Bobo already said pricing isn't an issue, so these recommendations might not apply to Bobo because a fair amount of the focus here is maintaining that all-white aesthetic with matching white components. So this Corsair iQOO H150i Elite Capellix AIO is $230, and this isn't even the most expensive one. I chose the non-LCD version. The LCD version is $300. This is a lot of extra money that's being spent on a cooler that's white that matches, maybe some extra RGB effects. It's not necessarily money that's being paid that's going to result in better system performance. That said, I'm not going to say ditch the water cooler and go for an air cooler, even though there are really nice air coolers like the Thermalright Phantom Spirit 120 EVO, which is only $43. If you are going for a specific aesthetic, if you already have the top end, or at least right there at the top end of the CPU options available on the platform, and you don't really have anywhere to go from there, then yes, dumping more money into your CPU cooler I think becomes more acceptable. Likewise, our Asus ROG Maximus Z790 Formula motherboard here is just gorgeous. It's all white, it matches the aesthetic. It's also over $700. There are plenty of Z790 motherboards available in the even $300 to $400 range that will essentially do all the functional things that this motherboard does, but they might not match quite as well. Those are the big ones where if you were on a budget, I would say dial back those products so that you can dump more money into your graphics card to upgrade from a 4070 Ti Super to, I would say, you want a 4080 Super in this build, if not an RTX 4090. Slightly less egregious to me are like all of these Thermaltake SWA fans. Having a really nice set of fans that all match, especially if you're doing RGB. I understand the desire to dump $240 on fans for a build like this because the end result does look very nice, as long as you understand and accept that these are not functionally doing a whole lot for you. Beyond a basic inlet and exhaust setup, adding more fans to a build doesn't really get you that much. But let's take you at your word that money is not an object and that you don't mind spending some extra cash on some aesthetic features. I don't think anyone should be blamed for that. Just don't do that at the expense of getting yourself more raw performance. And the two things I would absolutely say you should switch out or upgrade on this build would be upgrade your memory kit, go from a 2x16 gig kit to a 2x32 gig kit. At least start out with 64 gigs, but don't get DDR5 5200. Unfortunately, every combination of color, capacity, and speed is not always available, and sometimes you might want to double check like the Corsair website to see what they have over there. Right now they're not listing any 64 gig kits in white, so I'm just going to use PCPartPicker's drill down to look at DDR5 memory, and then I'm going to choose, I want a 2x32 gig kit setup, and I'm going to choose white memory, and then I'm going to sort by lowest price. There are lots of items listed on PCPartPicker if there are no prices. If there are no prices, it means PCPartPicker doesn't currently have a listing for a retailer to actually buy one of these kits. But look here, we have a 32 gig, 2x16 gig DDR5 6200 kit, Dominator Platinums for $173. So to see what other choices are available, I'm filtering DDR5 memory with speeds at 6000 or higher. I'm looking at a 2x32 gig kit, specifically looking at white memory, and there are some other options in the $175 to $200 range. Looks like Team Group, Silicon Power, Mushkin, Patriot, or, you know, if you really want Corsair, they've got the Dominator Titanium, but those are even more expensive. Not to get too into the weeds though, but my main point here is upgrade to a 64 gig kit from that 32 gig kit if you can. And then for your video card here, I think you specifically chose the Gigabyte Aero 4070 Ti Super because of the white to blend in with the white aesthetic. It's about $80 over the base price of a 4070 Ti Super. So I jumped over here thinking, let's find you a 4080 Super that's white and reasonably priced, and they are not. Zotac has a Trinity OC, Asus has Aerostrix Gaming OC, and there are a couple more models from MSI and Asus that don't have prices listed, but these are so ridiculously over the $1,000 MSRP of the 4080 Super that you might just go for a 4090. These 4090s are well over $2,000. But let's attempt to sum up how I would fix this build. For someone who doesn't have unlimited funds, there's quite a few parts here that are pretty expensive, pretty overpriced, that aren't resulting in a bunch of performance. That said, if you really want to stick with the all-white aesthetic, if you're okay spending a bit more money on certain things like an all-white all-in-one liquid cooler and an over $700 motherboard, then the upgrades I would most suggest would be going from 32 gigs to 64 gigs on your memory kit and upgrading your graphics card. And then I guess my final bit of advice, since it seems like we're having a tough time finding those specific upgrades that are both white and that are not super overpriced and that match your criteria, is you might need to wait just a little bit more time. We are dealing with pretty new hardware across the board here. You might find availability is a little bit better for all white graphics cards if you wait just a little bit. And I'd say specifically for the DDR5 memory, the higher speed, higher capacity, and specifically white kits might be a little bit more available as time goes on as well. Next build is from Called Third. This is also a high-end gaming PC with a price of around $2,500, but rather than all white with lots of RGB, we're going for as dark as we can get with as little RGB as they can sort out in the current everything must glow environment. Okay, starting from the top, we have a 7900X3D. I feel like the 7900X3D doesn't get a lot of love, and I'm gonna explain why in just a moment. We do need an aftermarket cooler. The Phantom Spirit EVO is like the most recent hyped up one. I talked about this one recently. It's only $43, excellent choice there. A solid B650 motherboard as well. If you don't need the features of X670 or X670E, you can save some money on B650. Here we're kind of splitting the gap. There are X670 motherboards that are down in the like $200 to $300 range, but if you're looking for a board that's a bit more overbuilt, then going up more towards the $300 range is a good choice. And here you're getting a really solid all-around motherboard from MSI with nice I/O on the back as well. I like it. Apparently Amazon even had it for like 270 bucks, so keep an eye out for those deals. Next up, those memory, we got a 64 gig setup with two 2x16 gig kits, so that's 4x16 total. More on that too in just a moment. We have a 2TB NVMe SSD. We have an RX 7900 XTX graphics card, a Fractal North case for 140 bucks, an MSI 850 watt power supply for 114. They've even included a Microsoft Windows license and a fan kit from Fantex. These are about $30 to $35 fans. These remind me a lot of the old school Gentle Typhoons. In fact, they have a really similar design. So excellent performance here, and you're not paying extra for RGB, although they are still pricey fans. Build is currently coming in at just over $2,500, and is there anything that could be done to fix this? So the first thing I would actually look at here is your processor. 79X3D has two CPU dies rather than the single die, which means you have the possibility of die-to-die latency affecting your game performance just a little bit. It is why the 7950X3D sometimes performs a little bit under the 7800X3D in certain tests. There are also other tests where the 7950X3D does a little bit better. Different games, different game engines, testing parameters, lots of things can affect that. Now, if you're gonna be doing other stuff with your system that is gonna benefit from increased cores and threads, then a 12-core CPU versus an 8-core CPU is definitely going to be the better choice. But if that's not going to be an issue for you, you'll probably get just slightly better gaming performance all around, and you'll save, I guess, only about $50 by going with the 7800X3D. That is just something to consider. It depends on your needs. And then, of course, the potential upgrade would be the 7950X3D, but you'd be talking about an extra $170 or so. So in the price range you're looking at, just make the call well between those two CPUs. The other thing I might swap out with this build is the memory kit that you've chosen. This is a totally solid memory kit from G.SKILL, but it is 2 by 16 gigs, but you were clearly aiming for a 64 gig setup. It is much easier to install, and especially to get XMP or Expo settings running with a single kit versus 2 kits put together. Remember that the Expo settings on a 2 DIMM kit are specifically made for 2 DIMMs. Dropping 2 more sticks in, even if they're the exact same kit, might not be stable because, again, those Expo settings or those XMP settings are tuned for a 2 DIMM configuration. So I think you'll be a little bit better served by just going with a single kit, 2 32 gig sticks, and fortunately that's still available with this same memory kit. It's even DDR5 6000, and the timings are pretty decent. These are solid timings. I've seen faster, of course, but it's not going to be a huge difference. And I would definitely say the added memory capacity is going to be better than a few points on the memory timings. Oh, and did I mention it's going to save you money? 2 of those kits is going to be, $214, whereas this single kit is $200. So that would be my recommendation there. But all right, to sum things up, I think you've made some really good choices overall, and especially I like that you're sticking to like an all black build and trying to not go for RGB everywhere, because that can simplify things with the build process. You don't have to do a bunch of extra wiring, and it also means you're not paying like an RGB tax for a bunch of extra RGB stuff. I guess the last thing would be that this 2 terabyte NVMe drive at about $160 seems a little bit pricey to me. It is a full-blown Gen 4 drive based on the read and write speeds that are listed here. I just feel like that's not going to, again, impact your gaming performance that much, and there are lots of 2 terabyte NVMe SSDs that are closer to $100 right now. Here's a good example. The Crucial P3 Plus is $120. Again, not quite as fast in terms of peak read and writes, but it is a savings of $50 or so. Moving on to our final build, which is, I guess, a new build, but kind of an upgrade from a 6700K from Xenoflossy 9091. Thanks for the hype. This is a build for Xenoflossy's wife, and it's 1440p gaming. Okay, let's see what we got here. An i7 13700K for $371, a $220 all-in-one liquid cooler to pair with that. That I'm gonna talk about. I do have a bit of an issue with that. We have a Z790 Aorus Elite AX motherboard from Gigabyte. This is a well-priced Z790 motherboard, so I'm okay with that. We got a 32 gigabyte DDR5 memory kit for $118. I'd say push that up to $6,000 or even $6,200 or $6,400 if you can. Again, we have a pretty pricey 2 terabyte NVMe SSD for about $170. And then we've got the Lianli O11 Vision case, the same case that we built Joe's computer in, which is a good case and actually not terribly priced at $133. And a $180 power supply with the Corsair RM1000E. A good power supply, but it's also 1000 watts. One of the features on PCPartPicker that I appreciate is this little blue area right here where it says estimated wattage. With your 13700K and your graphics card, where's your graphics card? Why don't you have a graphics card? Okay, so perhaps what Xenoflossy was asking is which graphics card should be paired with this build? So to simplify things, I'm just gonna do it this way. Let's edit the list. Now I should say that in this price range for the 13700K and the Z790 motherboard that you've chosen, you should really consider also the 7800X 3D, which should get you a bit more gaming performance than the 13700K. That said, some people prefer Intel, and there's certain applications that Intel does excel at a little bit better than AMD's Zen processors. So I'm gonna assume that you've considered that. We'll stick with the processor and the motherboard that you've chosen. I'm gonna ditch this all-in-one liquid cooler. I'm also gonna ditch your NVMe SSD, and I'm also gonna ditch your power supply because I think there's a more cost-effective option we could find. As for your memory, Corsair's Vengeance line does have a really nice balance between price and like pretty tight timings for some of their kits. And we're already looking at close to $120. So let's see what happens if we just bump up to DDR5 6000. That's only about $7 or $8 more. Let's see if there's a tighter timing kit available. All right, I'm very glad I double checked this because Corsair's tightest timings available on their Vengeance lineup with DDR5 6000 is less money than the kit that was already chosen. So I suppose the general advice here is to not just look at the memory capacity, you also want to look at the memory speed, and then you also want to look at the timings beyond that. You want faster speed if possible, and then you want timings that are tighter or lower values if possible beyond that. And sometimes it's just the way it goes with product listings. A better kit might be available for less money. We'll add that kit. Better speed, tighter timings, savings of $3. All All right, let's quickly spec out the rest of the system. The 13700K does not ship with a cooler. Absolutely my go-to air cooler option right now is Thermalright's Phantom Spirit. They have the Phantom Spirit EVO, which is about $7 or $8 more. Phantom Spirit does such a good job by itself, though. I think we can stick with that. And do note that it is available with RGB as well, if that's your bag. Here's how I shop for SSDs on PCPartPicker. Choose the capacity first, and we're looking for a 2TB drive. So this will get us 2TB drives and larger. We want SSDs, of course. And if you specifically want NVMe, you can choose M.2 2280. Because of how I did the drill down, we have 2TB and 4TB drives listed. I like to sort by price per gigabyte, because that will give you the best price regardless of the capacity. And here we can see 4TB drives and 2TB drives are roughly equivalent, at least in terms of the value side of things here when it comes to price per gigabyte. So let's just choose one from this list down here. We got Silicon Power UD90, that's a reasonable choice. I'm gonna go with the Lexar NM710 here. Here's how I search for power supplies. I generally like to aim for 80 plus bronze or 80 plus gold rated. Note that 80 plus ratings are not the end all be all in terms of power supply quality, but it's a good starting point at least. And then for wattage, you want to go with the wattage that meets or exceeds the wattage recommended for the graphics card that you're eventually choosing. So for a gaming PC, I'd say that starts at about 650 or 750 watts and goes up from there. Let's see what the best prices are for some of these parameters. Hey, we have a Corsair CX 80 plus bronze 750 watt unit for 65 bucks. That is more than $100 cheaper than the RM1000E here. Granted, it's 80 plus bronze rated and it's probably only partially modular. Now, it is only 80 plus bronze rated, not 80 plus gold, so a little bit less efficient. It's also not modular, so that might be something you want to look at. But in the $70 to $90 range, there should be some other choices in here that might meet the needs as well, including like Thermaltake's Tough Power, which is 80 plus gold for $80. To see if we can hit a really good budget though, I'm just gonna go with this Corsair CX unit. So here's the original build, which is $1,411. Here is my fixed version of the build, which is now $1,054. It's about $350 to $400 savings, and then you choose a graphics card. Maybe use some of that saved money to upgrade your GPU. There are a lot of choices for graphics cards in the mid-range, like $400 to $800 market right now. For 1440p, all of them are gonna do a pretty dang good job, which is cool. But my recommendation to you would be perhaps a 7900 XT, which you should be able to pick up for as little as $700 these days, maybe $20 or $40 more if you go for a different model than the Sapphire Pulse. The 4070 Super, as mentioned earlier, is among the best bang for the buck options on the NVIDIA side, and you can get those for around $600 or maybe even a little bit less. If you're trying to shave some dollars off, then take a look at the 7800 XT for around $500. There's also the 7900 GRE for about $550. That's a tough sell, I think, at this point between that and the 4070 Super. But that dollar amount plus your $1,050 core build will get you, hopefully, a build that is totally fixed up and good to go and get you some excellent gaming performance. And that is gonna do it for the first ever episode in this series. So thanks for stopping by to get your build fix. And I wanted to close by saying that I know that I am very much not the first person ever who has taken parts lists submitted by people who watch my channel and critiqued them or given feedback on them in a video series. PC Builder is another one of the channels out there who does some content that is very similar to this, so I wanted to say I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes, and I hope we're not viewing this as a zero sum. With me doing this, we're gonna have even more people who are able to get their build submitted and get some advice on parts that they might swap in to get better value for their money. So that's all I had to say about that. Thank you guys once again for watching this video. Links are down in the video description. If you enjoyed this, definitely hit the thumbs up button. Definitely give me your feedback in the comment section below. A huge thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series, and a closing reminder to check out my store at paulshardware.net for shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and all manner of high quality merchandise. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.